welcome to the Attractions Group podcast alongside Ryan Suhr, and this week, David Detling. I'm Don Helbig. Ryan, where can people hear us?
So you can hear us on all your favorite podcast apps, Apple, Google, Spotify. You know where to find them. And if you like the video version, and we're pretty handsome if you haven't seen the video version, we're available on YouTube by searching for the Attractions Group podcast. So I'm so excited about today's episode. Aren't you, Don?
Very excited. So, David,
it's because I'm on here.
Without any further ado,
David, without any further ado, I'm doing my once a quarter appearance on the podcast.
Well, typically when David's our third co-host, when he's in the third chair, it means he brought in one of his connections, and this one is one of the biggest one. So, David, tell us about who you brought to the table for our fine coffee chat this afternoon.
Well, he's done a little bit of everything. You can look down the list of things that he's done. Harvard business grad. He was with the Saturn launch team. I think that's correct. When GM launched him back in the 90s. CEO of Saab North America. He did a little time with Amazon back when they started into selling autos online. And then he went on to be CEO of Herschend Family Entertainment, then on to SeaWorld. And now he's works with his own leadership program based off a book called Love Works. His name is Joel Manby, and it is just outstanding, just a privilege and an honor to have you on the show. So glad you decided to come.
Well, thanks, David and Ryan and Don. Good to be with you. I'm really excited about it. I love the industry. I love being in it, and happy to have a chat with you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is an honor. But I mean, for people, I mean, obviously, Don was, sitting in the hot seat in the industry, and then David and I are on the outside looking in many regards. But your name came up. I distinctly remember you being CEO of Herschend. I distinctly remember when you moved over to SeaWorld. Both of which, those are two of my favorite chains. Just such unique, wonderful parks. But let's start from the beginning. David had mentioned that you worked in the auto industry. Tell us a little bit about the background of yourself in the auto industry and how that helped shape your ability to be the CEO of a theme park chain.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it didn't start with a real vision that I absolutely wanted to be in the auto industry. Really, when I came out of undergrad, I grew up extremely poor, and my parents couldn't help me at all in college. But I had been accepted to Harvard, and I knew that was going to cost a lot of money. And GM had a scholarship program that if I worked there for 2 years, they would possibly send me to school. That's actually what led me to want to be in automotive. But then when I got in it, I fell in love with it. And I started at the rock bottom. I was literally a plant foreman in a truck plant. And my first job out of undergraduate school, I went to a small liberal arts school called Albion College in Michigan. And so I was working with the UAW on the front line. It was really, really difficult. And I think the long story short, I love the industry, but the culture of the automotive companies was really, really difficult, and really fear-based culture, a lot of anger, a lot of, if you don't hit your numbers, you're out immediately. And so I make that point because later when we talk about Herschend, I'll juxtapose what I experienced in the auto industry. But I worked my way up the ladder, was one of the senior people at Saturn, as you mentioned, and then was my big break was they wanted a Saturn person at Saab because of Saturn's success. And Saab had a great car, but lousy marketing. Saturn had a pretty lousy car, but great marketing and great distribution. And so they wanted some of that sales, marketing, and distribution magic at Saab. And I went there and absolutely loved it. I think as it applies to theme parks, there are very similar things about both industries. They're retail focused, and you have to have great marketing, but you have to have a great product to keep people coming back. And the focus on the front line is absolutely critical, whether it's the hourly worker in the plant or the person selling the cars in a car dealership. I would call that the front line. And those are so critical to the industry. Just like in the theme park industry, if you're not able, as you guys know better than I probably, if you can't hire great people at the front line and teach them to love your customer so the customer keeps coming back, in both industries, you'll be in trouble if you can't do that well. And so I will say there are a lot of similarities in coming over to theme parks, but one last point I'll make is, on the other hand, switching industries made me a much better leader. And I think this is an application for your listeners. In the auto industry, I led more as an expert because I had come from the bottom up. I actually owned car dealerships for a while, came back into the OEM side. So I felt I knew everything, or a lot, not everything, but I led more autocratically. And when I came to Herschend and I came in as CEO into a theme park company, I was forced to lead Socratically. I had to ask a lot of questions, and I didn't know anything about running a theme park. And I actually felt I was a better leader because I attracted better people to work for me. I let them do their jobs with strong parameters. And I just found that I attracted and kept better people because I learned to lead a little bit differently. So I'm glad I had my auto experience, but I'm also really glad I switched to theme parks.
I like that I'm sorry, Don, in your book, you'd made mention that when you came into Herschend, you laid out, you really didn't know what you were doing. And when the current chairman, I think CEO, I forget what his title was taking you around, in your mind, in the humbleness of the moment, you were thinking this is not going to work out. And you said that you were making a mental list of auto companies to go work for, and you literally hadn't even started yet.
Well, but it's because who was turning me around? It was Jack Herschend. And Jack Herschend, as you know, is a legend in the industry. And Jack had been the only CEO and chairman, only CEO for 40 years. And so you think about a legend like Jack Herschend. I was on the board of Herschend already. So while I was CEO of Saab, they asked me to be on the board. So I'm coming to board meetings. I had no intention of coming to theme parks. But when I went to Amazon, and selling cars on Amazon, that was just the right idea at the wrong time. And the .com implosion happened. We were forced to sell. Our competitors had a lot more cash than we did. So when I sold that company, Jack called me and offered me the job. And I was just floored by it. But he saw something in me, and I certainly saw something in him. So that's the background, David, that I was touring with Jack Herschend. And when Jack knows everybody in the park, and he knows their names and their background, and everyone loves Jack and his brother Pete. I was so intimidated by that. I thought, man, I can never fill this man's shoes. But it's a great example of how the Herschends handled that transition, because they could not have been more supportive. I got all the support I needed. I had a great team around me, great general managers at the parks. I definitely brought a lot. And if you want to get into that, I can. But I think the biggest thing my job was to do there was they had a great culture in Branson, Missouri. But the farther you got away from Branson, where Jack and Pete were not, the culture was not as good or varied greatly, especially as we acquired more and more companies. My job was to take that magic in Branson and put a vernacular to it, to put systems and processes behind it, so that the rest of the parks felt as good as it felt when you went to Silver Dollar City in Branson. That was job number one. And job number two was to diversify away from really just Silver Dollar City and Dollywood. We needed to add a lot of indoor attractions. So we bought the Harlem Globetrotters, we brought aquariums, and we just wanted to diversify away from two tourist markets that were heavily dependent on gas price and weather. And because as a privately held company, we didn't have the resources to always make it through the downturns like some of the bigger companies did. So that was my task, but that's why I was intimidated walking around with Jack Herschend, but it all worked out fine.
Well, Joel, talk a little bit more about the culture there with Herschend when you were CEO. How did that culture form your beliefs on leadership and what you teach today?
I'll tell you, Don, I can't say strongly enough that Jack and Pete Herschend and the way Herschend runs their operations changed my life. I'll get emotional if I think about it too much. Coming from the auto industry, I can't say I ever loved leading every single day because the cultures were so tough, and it felt more like a grind. And when I was in the theme park industry with the Herschends, it felt like I was just called to be there. because they literally taught, once we put the vernacular in place, we taught our employees to love each other and therefore love on the guest. And it is not love as all your listeners are probably thinking, oh yeah, it's nice, soft and fuzzy. Well, I'm working for a public company and we have to hit our numbers. Well, we had to hit our numbers too. And we had a very tough board. We had returns that were just as good or better than Cedar Fair or Six Flags. We tracked it. We knew it. But we taught love the verb, which we literally went to 1 Corinthians 13, which is in the Bible. The Herschends are Christians. We didn't ask anybody that worked for us to believe a certain way, but we did ask them to act a certain way. And so we paraphrased 1 Corinthians 13 into 7 words that are really meaning love the verb. So it's being more patient. So meaning you don't call somebody out in public. You praise in public, but you admonish people in privately. You don't embarrass people in a group meeting. Being kind is the second word, where it's encouragement. We try to encourage 3 times more than we admonished. Being truthful, always creating an environment where people will tell the truth, not be afraid to tell the truth, which is why most people leave organizations. Or being trusting is the 4th word, which is trusting people who work for you. Being forgiving is the 5th word, which is not talked about very much in business, but we taught people to actually forgive each other so we could continue to work together. Being unselfish. We had, and we'll talk about Undercover Boss in a few minutes, I think, but we had a huge foundation that supported people when they were hurting. So and the last word was being dedicated, where we measured these words. We talked about these words. People were rated on their leadership according to these 7 words, and we call them our B goals. Like, what kind of leader do we want our leaders to be? And we all have do goals. We all have to hit attendance targets and margin targets and growth targets. Everybody does that in the theme park industry. But we also had B goals, which I think created a really dynamic, friendly culture that then translated to the customers, who absolutely love coming back. So I can't speak highly enough of the Herschends and what they had. My job, I can't say I did not create the culture, but I did put a vernacular to it to spread it to the other parks. But I love those people. I love the park. It's a great company.
Each of those words, they're difference makers.
They are difference makers. And, people think of love as an emotion, and it's not. The Greeks have 4 different words for love, and eros is the emotional love in Greek. But there's also agape, which is the love, the verb. And the problem with the English language is we only have 1 word for a very complicated topic of love. So your listeners need to understand it's not the emotion that you feel towards your significant other or your children. It's just these specific behaviors that we defined and taught to all of our leaders.
Well, Joe, you brought up the Undercover Boss episode that you did. Tell us how that came about and what the outcome of that was and how that affected you.
Yeah, the short story is it really impacted me and the company significantly. And what happened is, this was the first season, David. So no one knew what Undercover Boss was. We didn't know if it was like 60 Minutes where they're going to rake your company over the coals. So it was a risk to even say yes. Disney said no. Six Flags said no. Cedar Fair said no. Universal, they tried all the bigger companies, but they all said no, because it is a legal risk, right? You don't know what they're going to find. You don't know what they're going to communicate. But we said yes because we had so much faith in our people that we knew whatever they found, it wouldn't be big, and it would be great marketing for our parks. And this was coming right out of 07, 08, when you all know what happened in 07, 08. All the banks went out of business. Theme parks were hurt badly. We were making some tough decisions, had to do some layoffs and things like that. We felt we needed this boost. So we did the program, and what happened is we, by luck, we followed the NCAA quarterfinals. I think Duke played Villanova 25 million people watching that show. We came on right after, and that whole crowd followed us, and 98% stayed on. And when that show ended, we were inundated. As a matter of fact, we had so many emails that our server shut down at Herschend, and my phone blew up. I still have a 6-foot wall of notes and letters from people who wrote in saying, we wish we worked for a company like this. We wish we saw leaders like they were seeing on the show. And what I realized, David, is I wasn't the only one. When I was in the auto industry, I had an angst in my soul because I felt like there's a better way to lead. I just went to work every day thinking, I'm doing the best I can, but I don't see much being modeled around me. But when we had thousands of letters come in, I realized there is a national crisis in leadership, and there's a lot of people that expect more from leadership than they're getting. And that's what led me to write Love Works. I had no intention of being author, but bottom line, I wanted people in their 20s and 30s to learn that love can work in a for-profit environment, and learn it early, because I didn't go to Herschend until I was 40. And I wish I could have those first 20 years back, having learned what I learned at Herschend and beyond, that you can lead with love and have an extremely successful, profitable business, and eliminate the lie that you have to be an ass to make your business successful. And unfortunately, in American culture, there's a lot of people who believe that you got to be a jerk to hit the numbers. And it's not true. You guys know it's not true. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of people who think and behave that way. And in today's culture, today's world, the younger generations are not standing for it. And they're walking with their feet to go to cultures like Herschend. So the program was very impactful, because without the program, I don't think I ever would have written the book. And the book's really been kind of my calling beyond 9-to-5 work, or 9-to-9 work in this industry. But so that's what Undercover Boss meant to us.
Well, and Joel, as you're kind of closing the book on your time there with Herschend, just a question that comes up right here near the end. When you and I spoke about a year or so ago, you had made mention that while you were there, a sale of a very large theme park chain owned by Paramount Corporation, or CBS, was coming up, and Herschend tried to make a play for that. Can you say anything about how that came about, or what things you tried to do to make it happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all ancient history now. There's nothing confidential about it anymore. Our chairman of the board at Herschend, Nelson Schwab, one of the brightest guys I've ever met, great chairman, by the way, he helped start King's Entertainment, which really built or bought the whole chain of the Paramount Parks. Before they were Paramount, they were all King's Entertainment. We loved those parks. I mean, Kings Island, obviously fantastic. Canada's Wonderland, one of the best infrastructures we'd ever seen in a theme park. We liked all of them. I don't want to pick, favorites, although Kings Island is one of the best theme parks ever. And so we tried really hard to buy it. And when Paramount decided to sell, and we also had a former Paramount COO, Jane Cooper, who was our COO. She's a brilliant operator, wonderful person. So we went after it hard. We bid as high as we could bid. I think the difference, the reason Cedar Fair won the bid, they're a public company, so they had access to capital that we didn't. They could get more debt financing than we could. So they were able to stretch in price a little bit more than we did. Yet I will say, after it happened, in some ways we were thankful, because Cedar Fair, because of 07, 08, they got in a lot of trouble, and they had to cut their dividend because they took on all the debt to buy those parks. They had to cut their dividend. Their stock plummeted. You guys kind of know what happened there. And it wasn't that they made a bad decision. It's just they were unlucky with what happened with the recession. So in hindsight, I don't know that Herschend could have survived that without our access to public markets and being able to raise equity by issuing stock. The Herschends can't do that because they're privately held, and they're the sole owners. So maybe it was a blessing that we didn't get it. Cedar Fair had the wherewithal to make it through that downturn. And look, Cedar Fair is a great company. I love those guys too. So at least they're in good hands. Wouldn't say that necessarily about every theme park company, but I would about Cedar Fair.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that in the past about how other chains would have weathered the storm in the, you know, 07, 08, 09 time. And with Herschend, it would have been probably either that Herschend would be publicly traded in a ton of debt or owned by like Blackstone by now had they bought the Paramount Parks. So the Herschend that we know wouldn't exist.
I think, Ryan, you're probably, that's probably accurate.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Would have been tough to over.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So, you know, well, you mentioned, you know, you had a lot of like really good leaders, the Herschend family and so on, in the theme park industry. But you've been a leader outside of the industry. Can you compare and contrast what it's like being the top dog, the leader, in charge of many people in the theme park industry, where the product is entertainment versus cars or, you know, actual physical goods?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my answer is probably not what you would expect. Like what I loved about the car industry is buying a car is probably the second biggest purchase of your lifetime, right? It's either your home, the next thing is your car. And it's an emotional experience. And at Saturn, we made it so special for people. We gathered around them, applauded them. And I love that aspect of it. But on the other hand, it is such a large industry that even though I was CEO of Saab North America, I reported to the CEO of Saab Worldwide in Sweden, and all the engineering was there. And I had to fight like crazy to get changes to the car to fit the American market. I mean, I'll just tell you two quick stories. One, cup holders. The Europeans do not want cup holders, because if you're driving, you're supposed to drive. You're not supposed to drink and eat Whoppers and drink big gulps while you're driving. They hated that. So yet in the U.S. market, you had to have a cup holder. You wouldn't believe how many hours I spent trying to get a cup holder into one of our Saabs, or a really good remote entry system, or on and on. But my point is, you didn't have as much control over the final product because the industry is so big, and one car line is billions and billions of dollars of investment, that I felt more out of control sometimes. Like I wish I could have made bigger changes faster to our car product line. Like I wanted crossover vehicles like crazy in the US market. I knew that's where the market was going, and we couldn't get the engineers to do that. In the theme park industry, to contrast, what is so amazingly wonderful about theme parks is you get this EBITDA flow, this cash flow every year. And it's completely up to you and the leadership team of what you do with it. The slate, the palette is blank, and the creativity and ingenuity that this industry brings is just so much fun. I'm left-handed. I'm a very creative person. I love the creative process. I was very involved in it, maybe more than some of the creative people wanted me to be. But I can't stress enough how, compared to other industries, the theme park industry is big enough to have scale and cash to do fun things, but you're not very restricted. And the creativity that promotes is, I think, what makes theme parks so amazing. And I love the innovation every year in the industry. So that's how I would answer that question. It's just a great creativity engine.
All right, Joel, you came into SeaWorld when they were headed for a difficult time. So from a CEO standpoint, how do you overcome adversity when it comes to, bad PR and diminishing sales as a result of it?
Well, I will say, for those watching the visual, I had jet black hair before I went into SeaWorld, and it literally turned white within 2 years. And I'm not sure I handled the stress very well. I can't overemphasize how difficult that whole situation was. When I came in, the previous CEO, Jim Atchison, who's just a wonderful human being, a great CEO, he had been let go of what happened there. So they brought me in, and that's a whole different story. I don't think that was fair. I don't think he deserved that. It was a lot of factors outside of his control, but it is what it is. And we are still good friends today. But how I tried to handle it is just, I had to focus every day, Don, on what only I could do. We were in such a crisis. Our capital, literally the EBITDA was about 30% of what it had been. And obviously they carry the company. If it wasn't for the Busch parks that we had in Williamsburg and Tampa, I don't know that the company would have made it. In fact, I'm quite sure it wouldn't have. And so I tried every day to think, there are so many issues going on. We had turnover, operational issues, but we had this big elephant in the room, which is the protesters against us, and the running of Blackfish 500 times on CNN had taken our trustworthy ratings in America from 85% trustworthy to 30% trustworthy in just 2 years. And I had never seen in the history of business a brand drop so much. And then Shamu, which was our biggest marketing hook, according to the research, had now become our biggest liability. Like, people were not coming to the park because of Shamu. And so our plan was to diversify away from animal shows, because we knew that was the lowering tide. And we needed to, the old SeaWorld, you went in, there were kind of 4 main animal shows, and, dolphins and killer whales and seals, et cetera. And our strategy, which worked, was to diversify and add a lot of attractions that were still ocean based. Like, we partnered with Guy Harvey to do a lot of new rides around the chains, where Guy would come and he would do paintings and mantles, and retail would go towards his causes of ocean health. So we diversified away from shows to rides, festivals, night attractions, meaning to get people to stay for dinner time. And so we added a lot of festivals, which do not take the capital dollars. So we had the right strategy, and it did work. But what happened, that was the big, you know what? Oh shit, if I can say that on air.
Of course.
We literally were going to expand a killer whale pool in San Diego. We got word that they were going to pass legislation. The votes had been counted. They were going to pass legislation outlawing the breeding of killer whales. At the same time, the local authorities in San Diego did not allow us to expand our killer whale pools to make them more natural and bigger. And we had a whole plan there, unless we stopped breeding killer whales, which made absolutely no sense, right? We're going to invest $100 million in a new ride, and then we couldn't breed killer whales anymore. So literally, with that legislation that was going to be passed, we were out of business in the long term on breeding killer whales. The decision of the board, and it wasn't just my decision, it was the board's as well, all of us agreed that we were going to have to end, if breeding was going to end in California, the question was, we were going to do it across the board and end it in Texas and Florida as well. And we felt like if we didn't, that 5 years from now, it not only would be in California, that it would move east, and then we'd have activists in Orlando calling for the same thing. And PETA was protesting all 3 of the parks every single week. I hate to tell you what those people are not good people. I mean, I got multiple death threats on my cell phone, not on my cell phone, on my office phone, literally specifically naming out my children. I mean, I had to have security walk me out to cars. Every park I went to, I had to have literally, one of my security guys used to work for Clinton as a CIA. And he told me all kinds of great stories about Clinton, but it was insane. And yet what people don't realize when they look at what happened, we were outlawed in California, and our decision was, do we do it at the other 2 parks? We decided to do that. And look, those distrust ratings that were down at 35%, within 2 months, they had gotten back to about 50. And within 6 months, they were back up to almost 80% trustworthy. Our numbers did start to change. And as I left, we were up 55% in California, 12% overall. It is what saved the company in the midst of the crisis. 50 years from now, will it be the right decision? I don't know. I hope maybe someday culture will change and they'll realize the real power of having these animals, and maybe breeding can come back. But in that moment, in that crisis, that's what we were forced to do. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but it was a very complicated situation. And the only way I got through it is I only could focus on what I could get done and only the CEO could do, which was really that existential crisis of the killer whale. And I spent a ton of time in Washington with lobbyists in California trying to beat that legislation back, but it just didn't work.
Yeah, that's you were definitely there for a fascinating time, and the people that were fans of SeaWorld, like myself, like I saw the value in the conservation efforts and so on. So I mean, it's different points of view. It's but yeah, I understand where you're coming from. But let me.
Well, I'll tell you.
No, go ahead.
Can I just add one?
Yeah.
I didn't want to make that decision. I wasn't happy having to stop orca breeding. We were kind of forced into it legislatively. And could we have sued the state of California? Could we have won those lawsuits? Maybe, but the odds were low, and it would have taken 5 to 10 years. And as a public company, we just couldn't take that risk. And I tell you, the hardest meetings I've ever had in my life was going, and I went door to door and met with every trainer that we had, every orca trainer, face to face, small conference rooms, lots of tears. They were pissed. They didn't like it. I understood, but I didn't hide from it. I went and I met with every single one of them. I explained why we had to do it. And look, 30% of the company did not like it, did not like me because of it. And I get it. I understand all that. It's just sometimes you get in situations, you have to make the best decision overall for the long-term welfare of the company.
Yeah. So, speaking of, making decisions and being that guy, so you're in a unique position, given your resume, shall we say. And I've always wanted to ask somebody this because you really aren't in front of these people a lot. But so you've been the CEO of Herschend, which is a private company, and the CEO of SeaWorld, which is a publicly traded company. Compare and contrast the two positions, because same title, but very different environments, I imagine. Can you elaborate on that?
You cannot, and Ryan, first of all, it's a great question, because I think a lot of people wonder that. You cannot get two more different environments. And, I would say, to be blunt and honest, which I try to always be, in hindsight, I'd say be careful what you wish for, because I had since I was a little kid, for some reason, I always had it in me that I wanted to be a CEO of a public company. I wish now that I didn't ever have that on my bucket list, because, in hindsight, I wish I had never left Herschend. I loved that company, and, but SeaWorld called. It was a compelling opportunity. I had been at Herschend 15 years. And Jack and Pete they understood why I felt called to go there. But the difference is, as you might imagine, in a privately held company, you always do what's right for the long term, and you have a longer term perspective. The problem with publicly held companies, they're run by quarterly results. There's way too much time and effort spent on how is it going to impact your quarterly earnings call. And if the amount of time I spent at SeaWorld, prepping for quarterly earnings calls and going through the rehearsals of it, all that time is not spent on turning the business around. And too many decisions are made, and frankly, especially we had an activist investor came in, and he wanted even shorter term results. So just the things that were done to cut costs that I think can hurt the brand, there's all those pressures are much, much greater in a publicly held company. The upside is you have more resources. You can issue stock anytime you want to raise capital. You tend to have ability to raise higher debt levels, like 4 to 5 times EBITDA, versus we were restricted at Herschend to 3.5 times EBITDA because we didn't want to get over leveraged. So that's the positive side of being in a public company. But I think if I had a choice, the honest answer is I'd always go private if you have the resources and the capital to grow as fast as you want to grow. That's
Right.
that's the long and short of it. There's a lot more.
Yeah. Joel, tell us about your side project, Orange.
Yeah, Orange is a huge blessing in my life, Don. It's a ministry. It's a nonprofit, but we are the largest distributor of basically church curriculum. So we go all the way from preschool, and we teach values is the main point. Like for elementary school students, there's 36 values that are rotated every 12 months. So it's a 3-year cycle. And there are values that you'd want any child to learn, but they're taught this in church. And what was unique about it is we also had things to give the parents, tools to give their parents so that they could reinforce these same values. So let's just say you're talking about generosity in Sunday school. You go home and your parents are also teaching you generosity. And then we had a public school version that we took out the Bible verses, and it was just generosity, period. So literally we had kids going to school, getting generosity the same month they were getting it at church, same month they were getting it at home. It was brilliant. We're in 10,000 churches, 40 countries around the world. And it feels good to teach the right things to kids. Again, just very values based. So I really love that, and have been doing it, helped start it 25 years ago, and it's still going strong. So really enjoy that part of my life.
No, I'm sorry. Did I just interrupt somebody? Oh, okay. Yeah. Now you've been in the private company, Herschend, then you were in the public company, the SeaWorld, and now you've got a book and a company that you've started called Love Works. We're going to have a couple questions about that, but just an initial for an introduction, give a quick elevator pitch of what Love Works is.
It's basically, I take the book, which I've already talked a little bit about. It is about how to lead with love. Yep, thank you. And it takes those 7 words I described earlier and just goes into what are the specific behaviors. What are we really talking about here? And I started a consulting firm, very boutique. I keep it small. And I either speak on it or I go into teams and I try to put this culture into place. And I have a 5-step process, which will probably be the topic of my next book, of how to actually do that. You have to do certain things to make a culture go in place. And so I implement those 5 steps. I also have something called Executive Circle, where C-suite or aspiring C-suite executives have a monthly call as a group, and I teach them. I have basically a mini MBA in servant leadership where I teach that, and then it includes one-on-one calls with me if they want mentoring or advice on their own career. And I have some clients that I also do turnarounds with them. So I do that about 50% of the time. I love it. And if any of your listeners are interested in any of that, joelmanby.com is my website. I'm sure you'll put it in the notes, and they can find out more there. But I love doing that right now, David. It's just it's a passion and a calling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we will link anything you want in the description. So Love Works is the name of the book as well as the company. And as David mentioned, we're going to dive into that a little bit more right now. So let me ask you this. When we're saying this and you said love is a verb, not necessarily a noun in the context of what you're using. So why does love work? And why have you become so passionate about it from a business standpoint?
I think it's because growing up, we all are great products of our environment growing up. Well, maybe not so great sometimes. My parents were very kind and loving people. And I grew up with that. And so I thought that's how the world was. And then when I got into the business world and I was exposed to General Motors and automotive, as I've already explained some of the stories, and there are many, many more, I really started believing a lie that this is how leadership was and that everybody led this way. And I many times thought about leaving business altogether. Like maybe I should be a coach, or maybe I should be a minister, or whatever. And I'm so glad that I hung on, because as I said earlier, I had this angst in my soul that there had to be a better way to lead. And thank goodness Jack Herschend called me and asked me to be on the board, and then the rest is history as we talked about it. But I think since I had this parental teaching in my soul, that when I didn't happen in autos, I had this huge angst, and it was answered at Herschend and beyond. I think that's why it resonates with me so much. And plus, look, Ryan, love is the positive energy force on earth. Whether you have a faith or not, everybody agrees the world would be a better place if we had more love in it. And we have more disconnection, more hatred, more negativity now than I've ever seen. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think social media amplifies it like crazy, and the way we market to people, we put labels on people, and labels just divide, they don't unite. And so I believe not only is it a great way to lead, I think it's the only positive force on earth left that we can focus on to make leading better, to make our homes better, to make the country better. And I think to make America great again, we actually need to make America love again. And that's why I'm passionate about it, and that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, Joel, it seems like that would be, what you talked about, just perfect way to talk about love as a leadership principle.
Well, I think, from my standpoint, those 7 words, I think the one thing I'd like to add, I don't think it has to be those 7 words, right? I mean, people could read my book and they could say, we love the idea, but in our values in our company, we don't necessarily want those exact 7: patient, kind, trusting, truthful, forgiving, unselfish, and dedicated. Like, I'm not claiming it has to be exactly those 7. What I am suggesting is those values are related to them. That has to be the mandate of how we treat each other, that we should have expectations of how people are treated, as well as strong expectations for performance. And if there's one thing I'd love your listeners to take away from the conversation on leading with love, is that the lie I talked about earlier, that you have to be, difficult to get great results, I don't believe fundamentally. And that everyone can put these kind of B goals in place, and you need to measure them, teach them, you need to reinforce them. And matter of fact, at Herschend, we even paid according to hitting your B goals. So if you hit your numbers, your margin and your profit, your do goals, and you hit your B goals, in other words, how you perform to those 7 words of love, you would get the top raise. So if you were great, you got a great raise. If you were bad, you probably wouldn't last very long. And we spent most of our time in leadership coaching people that were good on the do goals, bad on the B goals, or good on the B goals, bad on the do goals. And we would coach and get up to the top box in both. So that it's not just a philosophy. You have to have the systems and the processes behind it to make it work. But it's worth the effort, and it's worth the work that it takes.
Joel, just got one more quick question on this, because as you talk about love as a leadership principle, you talk about in your book that you talk about public and private admonishment, and different concepts are taken both ways. Have you ever given someone a public admonishment using the principles of patience and praise, and had it backfire? And in the age of social media, they can backfire very publicly.
Yeah.
How would you handle that?
First of all, every rule does have exceptions, right? They say every rule is made to be broken. Even the within patience, one of our behaviors was, as I said earlier, praise in public, admonish in private. There were times that I admonished publicly, and I talk about it in the book, but there are times where you can do it because you have to set an example. And for me, it happened like in a budget meeting. A division missed its profit big time last year, and they move immediately into what are they going to do this year without addressing why they missed it. And I stopped the meeting, and I called them all out and said, this isn't acceptable, right? We missed big. You didn't have a good forecast. I want to learn from it. Let's talk about what happened. And that was a public admonishment. But I think you do it in a way that keeps people's dignity and respect. And Jack taught me that. He was the master at it. He could come in your office and basically read you the riot act, but he did it in such a way that you still left feeling good, because he'd start with a positive, he'd go to the hard issue, and then he would end with two or three more positives. And he actually, when he left the office, you felt okay, but he really just told you, I did not like at all what happened here, or this is unacceptable to me. So even when you have to admonish, there's a way to do it that keeps people's confidence and dignity. Because the research says if you don't reinforce people like positive 3-to-1, and all you do is negative reinforcement, they'll lose their confidence. They won't perform as well, and they'll probably end up leaving. And people just need that encouragement. I'll ask the four of you, have any of you or any of your listeners had too much encouragement? And the answer is always no. So that's just one example of, the praise and public admonish part. The rule can be broken, but it's how you do it that's critical.
Awesome.
Well, Joe,
Yeah, go ahead. Do you have any final
unless
thoughts?
there's anything else, I was just going to say thank you so much for carving out time. I know you're busy. You got probably moving on to the next thing after the call here, but really just appreciate you taking a few moments to be on the podcast, to open up not just your book that people can buy, but your life as a book, really. And before you are done here, is there you want to tell people how they can get the book, be on your website, or find you if they like what they hear and they want to act on something?
Well, yeah, for whether it's book or coaching or mentoring or anything, just go to joelmanby.com. All of it's there. But I also want to close with encouragement to you guys and to everybody listening. I know the industry can be really tough at times, and it's hard to find good people. It's really long hours, and it can get discouraging, especially when the economy goes south. But it's a great, great industry, and creating these memories worth repeating that we do, and the best day that a family may have together all year, it's a great, great calling, and it's worth it. And as I said earlier, we need more love, and we need more positive, wholesome family experiences that people can do together. So I just want to encourage you guys, keep doing what you're doing. You have a great podcast, you're building the industry, and for everybody listening, just keep doing what you're doing. It's a wonderful, wonderful industry to be part of. As somebody who did not spend their life in it, I can say that with great authority. So appreciate what you guys all do.
Awesome. True honor, Mr. Manby. It really is. Thank you so much.
All righty. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of the day.
Well, that was a very interesting conversation. So thanks again to Mr. Joel Manby for being on the show. Quite an honor. Don, what do we got next?
Well, we have our follower question. So if you follow us on X, the formerly Twitter platform, this one comes from Donnie Lakes. And I thought both of you would enjoy this question. I think it's a great one. It says, if you could give any IP an attraction, which IP would you choose? And what would the attraction be? And for bonus points, what park would house this attraction? We'll start with you, David.
I'm going to defer to Ryan to start this one.
I was hoping that you would go ahead and answer so I can take some time. I mean, it's easy to think of the different shows that you like, and obviously, like, there's different Star Trek things that never really were done right by Paramount, which I think would be awesome. I know that there's a park in Germany. I don't remember which one, that has like a Star Trek The Next Generation roller coaster, which is really well themed and stuff. I'd like to see that. I mean, I would say that. And if it's any park that's going to do it, that's kind of relative. I mean, of course, I would want Kings Island to do it so I could do it all the time. But when we're talking about what park is going to do it best, I would probably have to be in the camp of Universal. Because Universal is aggressive and they're non-cutting and stuff, and I think that they're a fantastic creative group that can do that sort of thing. Back to you, David.
As far as any attraction, I would like it if one of the regional parks or one of the in I guess the Cedar Fair parks and the Six Flags parks, I'd consider them to be regional. Most of them don't tend to be destination parks, but to have something that is designed by Universal or designed by a Disney. There's a whole other profit center that could be made out there by designing the attractions and installing them somewhere. But there's some parks, and I'm not as well versed on them as you guys are. But there's some things that come up every now and then on the IAPA bulletins that get sent out. Some very heavily themed attractions that crop up in Europe. Just some theming and elements that just aren't seen here. It's just the attention to detail.
Mm-hmm. I agree. What about you, Don?
I'm going to go way out in left field here.
Oh,
and
God.
I'm going to pick an IP. I'm going to go with Apple. And
Okay.
Listen to me. I think you could have a great attraction with Apple. I think you could call it like iWorld Adventure. Make it a high-tech, immersive dark ride. It takes guests through a journey through the evolution of Apple products. You start out with the old Macintosh and then, work your way through the different rooms until you get to where you are today. It could be something that, is continually updated. But why not? And you think about Apple, they're based out in California. So I would go with, and then they seem to be getting more involved with the tech stuff. I would go with Six Flags Magic Mountain as the park to host this.
Really? You wouldn't go with Epcot? Because what you said has Epcot written all over it.
It does. But you got to have some more reasons to want to head out west.
I agree. And, I'm a big Apple fan. I like my tech stuff, and I spend a lot of...
Well, I thought about you as I thought about what would I call this, and I thought iWorld Adventure, and I thought, it's be right up, Ryan's alley, because everything about Ryan is Apple.
Yeah, it's funny because I was adamantly Android until about 10 years ago. No, not that long ago. It was 2016, so 7 years ago. But yeah, well, what's funny is they don't put I in front of much of anything anymore because it's something with the copyright, so it would be Apple Adventure World, or they'd announce it as iWorld, and then when it opened, it would be Apple Adventure World. So yeah, very interesting, very interesting. David, to add to your point though, so Universal actually has a group that is exploratory for outside stuff. And things that are evident of it are the new park in Texas, as well as the Horror Nights thing in Las Vegas. And Don, correct me if you would know this, but they're opening a Toothsome at I think it's the Philadelphia Phillies park.
Yes,
have you heard about that? So it's so what you're talking about is out there. Now, will they go to Kings Island or Six Flags Magic Mountain or whatever and design an attraction for them? That's, I don't know. But as far as them reaching out and trying to go beyond their bounds, they're there. I think that's really cool. Cool call out. Okay, so let's wrap it up with one of our favorite segments, something we like to call the Pick Six. And we have a really good Pick Six because, ironically, SeaWorld announced all their stuff. Don, take number one.
Well, number one, Busch Gardens Tampa has announced that they will be adding a B&M inverted family coaster in 2024 named Phoenix Rising. Very few details right now are known. However, it will have onboard audio. I saw the rendering, looks really good. A friend of the show, Brian Lamb, messaged me yesterday after this was announced, and he said, is this an inverted or is this a suspended coaster? And I think it's a great question because it can go either way.
Why do you think it could go either way? I think it's pretty inverted to me.
Well, because it swings a little bit. It swings a little bit, so that's where he thought suspended might come into play because of the swing.
Do you draw the line at whether it swings or not? Because for me, it's suspended if the vehicle's below you rather than your feet dangling. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah. So I thought invert would be the way I would go, but I can see the argument for suspended. So what's next, Ryan?
All right, number two. So Busch Gardens Williamsburg has been announced that they're going to do an extensive update to Loch Ness Monster. Now, we knew that they were going to be doing some work on Loch Ness Monster, but they went into a little bit more detail. They're going to be doing extensive track work and new effects in the mountain. It's going to be a smoother ride. The last public rides for the season is going to be October 31st, and there's going to be a VIP event just for pass holders on November's 4th and 5th, so they can get that one last ride on Loch Ness Monster as it exists right now. But to be fair, the Loch Ness Monster we have right now is also like a retrofit because they have S&S trains that are mock-ups of the Aero ones. But I freaking love that ride. I'm so excited about that. I love being inside that tunnel. It takes forever.
Awesome
Awesome.
ride.
David, I believe you have number 3.
All right, number 3, SeaWorld Orlando announces the new Penguin Trek coaster. Guests will board snowmobile-like cars and traverse through indoor and outdoor sections. The new coaster features 2 launches and speeds up to 43 miles per hour across a 3,020-foot track.
Awesome. Yeah, it's going to be.
You need snowmobile in Orlando.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but that's taking over for the Penguin Dark Ride experience. Have either of you guys done that?
I did.
So you did the actual ride?
Yeah, 2 different versions you could ride. The intense one and not so intense one.
I don't remember there being 2 different I remember there's a way where you can go just into the Penguin exhibit, which is the only thing that's been open since COVID, I think. But then they had those autonomous ride vehicles, kind of like what they have for Ratatouille and stuff like that, where it takes you around a dark ride. I remember when that was new. The ride honestly was fine. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, and a lot of people just went in there for the air conditioning. So I think it's a fair trade. I don't know. What do you think, Don?
I think so. It sounds fun. You got over 3,000 feet of track. As David mentioned, 43 miles per hour. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great for families.
I agree, and it's a B&M too. So that'll be interesting. The one at Dark Coaster is intimate, I think, right?
Yeah, this is very similar to a couple other ones they've got out there. You've got Wavebreaker, the rescue coaster at SeaWorld San Antonio, and Arctic Rescue at SeaWorld San Diego, and those are by Intamin. So really, similar but different manufacturer here with B&M.
Yeah, I agree. This will have indoor and outdoor sections, so it's 2 launches, but I don't think it's 2 courses. Like with Dark Coaster, you go through the whole course twice, but since it's in the dark, I haven't ridden it yet, but you allegedly don't notice it because it has different effects every time you go around. But yeah, this will be cool. The cool part about SeaWorld is that they announce something, they build it, and they open it rather quickly. So by the time we make it out there, maybe in the spring or so, then we'll probably get to ride. Okay, Don, I think you're back.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, Harry Potter fans, they show respect to the Dumbledore actor at Universal Parks. The tribute to the recently deceased Michael Gambon took place at Hogsmeade in Universal Islands of Adventure. Fans dressed in wizarding robes, waving wands, and butterbeer in hand. They marched together, their wands pointed upward in a unified gesture of respect and remembrance. It's kind of cool. As we all know, Harry Potter. It's got a tremendous, huge following. So, it's nice to see what they did there.
So my fondest memory of Harry Potter is the time when David and I were down in Universal on other business, and I was able to finagle some Universal tickets for us. And David swore me to secrecy to not tell his daughters that he and I went to Harry Potter World without them. Do you remember that, David?
Yep, and I blew the lid off that on my own and kind of buried myself.
Well, it was fun. I mean, honestly, the vast majority of what I know about Harry Potter is through the parks, but a couple friends of mine tried to show me the first movie. We watched about half of it, and I mean, I like what I saw. I got to take the time. There's so many movies, and they're so dang long, but boy, are those fans committed, right?
They are, and it's but you like to see that kind of loyalty and paying their respects, and it just shows how strong that brand is.
I completely agree, and what I see is cool.
Universal does such a great job of literally making it come alive.
Yeah, and they're very good at plussing it too. Like they made a big deal about having the Death Eaters in Diagon Alley. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up my Rolodex of Harry Potter terms, but they had the Death Eaters in Diagon Alley, and people were super excited about that. And I was like, yeah, who cares? But they actually did I put it as one of our shorts on YouTube, but they do this thing where they wave the wands and then fire comes out, the lights go off and stuff. It's so cool. All right, enough about Harry Potter. Let's talk about Wonder Woman. So we're over at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas now. Our good friend Jeffrey Siebert showed us an update that Wonder Woman Golden Lasso, which is a RMC single rail coaster, the first one in the world, has reopened after its phase 1 was completed of a multi-phase improvement project for that ride. So this first phase improved things like the controls and the station and so on. So it's going to be open through the end of the year, and then in early 2024, it's going to close again and reopen, with the most noticeable thing to the guests being that it's going to have new trains, and they're supposed to be more comfortable. So I don't think any of us have been on one of those, have we?
I have not.
Have you, David?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I've always heard that there are comfort issues and stuff, but it's funny because it's almost like the 4D coasters, where I always hear the smaller ones are the better ones. So the one at the Cedar Fair Park out in California, was it Great America that has one, I think? And then Six Flags Fiesta
They
Texas,
do.
they both open mirror clones. But then they opened the one at Six Flags New Jersey, which is way bigger, and people still rave about the original one. So very, very cool. David, what's up next?
Number 6, USA Today announced the results of the fan-voted top 10 best Halloween theme park event list. Winners include Howl-O-Scream at the Busch Gardens Parks, Howl-O-Scream at the SeaWorld Parks, and Hella-Fun at Knoebels.
I thought it
And I
was
think
so
I'm pronouncing
funny
it
that
right.
the top three were Hallow something. You know, I mean, as people in the industry, we understand why SeaWorld and Busch Gardens have the same name for their Halloween event, how it's Howl-O-Scream. But since it's Hallow Fun for the third place one, that just puts the icing on the cake. But congratulations to those three. Don, you experienced Howl-O-Scream at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Would you say that, just from your knowledge and your experience with that one park, that it's one of the better ones in the United States, that it's a worthy vote?
Yeah, I believe so. My experience there was, I thought it was very tastefully, done. It was just the attention to detail when you went through the haunted, houses, the midways for the scare zones, the actors, all into their characters. So I was really impressed with it. I definitely, plan to go back next fall.
Awesome. Cool. Hey, what a pick six. All right. Yeah, I love it when our pick six is like, we have to choose which ride announcements we're going to do with that. But very cool news out of the SeaWorld parks. Thanks again to Joel Manby for being on the show. Make sure that you check out his book, Love Works. We're going to have a link in the description of where you can find him at joelmanby.com, as well as his book, which I ordered on Amazon. I realized I hadn't ordered it yet, so I ordered it while we were talking. So I'm going to read that, and I'll put something online about my thoughts with it. But he had some very interesting stories, and it was fantastic. But David, thanks for sitting in the third chair today.
Thanks for putting up with me and pulling the old third chair card on you.
Yeah, Don, thanks for co-hosting.
Yep, a lot of fun. And, I've worked with a lot of different presidents and CEOs throughout my, career, which also includes the sports industry. And, Joel seemed like the kind of guy that, you would want to work for. Just, being straightforward, transparent, honest, all those kind of things. And just the kind of guy, again, you want to work for. And like Ryan, you want to buy his book. And I plan to as soon as we log off.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing about it is we have a lot of people that have written books that have been on the podcast, and I usually buy them. And I kind of made the decision to kind of slow down because I've got so many books piled up that I just don't have time to sit down and read this many books. But he starts talking, and I'm just like, man, I like what that guy has to say. I could take something from this. So I went ahead and ordered it while he was during the interview. But awesome. So make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast apps, Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. You know where they are. You can watch the video version on YouTube. Follow us on X/Twitter at attractions_GRP. If you're interested in a sponsorship spot, shoot us a private message, and we'll shoot some out. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next week.